Hey everyone, Mike Shea here, along with Ryan Mendoza. If you don't know who we are by now, that's your problem. We are talking about Miskatonic High number 15, which is the second part of our Aswang story, dealing with Ren and Simon going to the Philippines. I'm not going to bother recapping at this point because if you don't know what happened in 14, please go watch it now. Or go read it now and come back because we're going to jump right into 15. Why don't we go ahead and start by talking about the cover for issue 15? So I imagine that this is hard, with a two-part story to say, okay, you sort of throw your best ideas at the first story, and now you have to come back and come up with something for the second part. How do you approach that to come up with like a second cover for the second half of a story?
Yeah, you're right about that. Because usually you come up with the best ideas when thinking about the whole storyline. I mean, that includes both issues. So I find that you look for a theme within that issue that separates it from the first part of the story, and then even if it's a bit similar to the previous cover, it will still make that cover rise above the other because of the new elements that you include with it. So just like this one, it still includes the aswang, although it's in its other form, the complete form, without it separating from its lower half. But this time we give it a hint of what happened in this issue, or at least we know what happened with the last page of the last issue, with Ren being trapped in the, what did you call it? The void, the memory void.
The spirit void? I can't remember. The soul void? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something. Oh man. Yeah, well, that's an idea that popped up immediately. I mean, I had to have Ren in her spirit form in this one. And at the same time, I wanted to create a bit of drama here. So I had to have Ren look dead or unconscious. So people will be wondering what happened. Then that's when I thought about, what if I put the spirit Ren behind Simon and Ren? And it doesn't give away too much of what goes on in issue 15, not at all. I mean, I had other ideas for the cover, but it gave away too much about the story. So this one succinctly gives a hint of what the story is about without giving any of the plot points up.
Right. And I really like the concept that you came up with here, because like one of my nightmares is like being asleep or being not able to move my body and have something approaching me, like that you can sense and you can feel, but there's nothing you can do about it. So like this gives me the willies just looking at it, because that's exactly a fear of mine. And to if you're Ren and you have to rely on Simon to protect you, you're in deep trouble.
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, no,
I like that.
Yeah.
It's like that. The thing where you have a nightmare where you can't move your body.
Exactly. Yep.
But you're aware that you're sleeping.
Right.
Just that you can't wake up.
Right. Like you're in bed, that you're asleep, but also like you're not able to move your body and something is coming towards you. Oh yeah,
we discussed this before. We always said that the things that scare us is mostly the thing that resonates most with horror. I mean, I'm arachnophobic, so I like drawing things with lots of legs and things like that. So that scares me. And then I also don't like slimy things. So believe it or not, I don't like tentacles at all.
Which is funny because you draw an awful lot of them.
Well, that's it, I guess. If you're scared of something, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of realize you realize it more on
Yeah.
page rather
Mm-hmm.
than on something that doesn't really interest you. I mean,
Right.
it's probably constantly in your mind without you loving it, but
Mm-hmm.
but it's constantly in your mind that it kind of wakes up your primal fears
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
somehow.
Right. And I don't know about you, but working on a comic, we're on issue 15 now. You really
Mm-hmm.
have to be engaged in a number of different ways to still be on it. And so, dealing with your fears or the things that inspire you or whatever, at this point you're really bringing them into the comic.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's talk for just a minute about, because you mentioned this, and I think it's an interesting point, is when you are working very early on with the concepts for a cover, you tend to come up with like three or four ideas, and we end up talking about them. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that comes up a lot is how much do we want to spoil what's going to happen in this issue? You know, to we want to tease people into what's going to happen, but we don't want to give away too many of the surprises that we expect them to find. And like, I don't know about you, it's a hard balance for me, especially with all the promotion that we do for an
Yeah.
issue. Is like, how much can you give away to get people interested in reading the comic without going too far that by the time they get it they're going to know all the plot points and all the surprises.
Yeah. It's definitely a balancing act
Yeah.
because you definitely don't want to spoil too much, but at the same time, you want to hype the readers
Mm-hmm.
to get into that issue. Because I mean, if you come to think about it, if you do make a spoiler full cover,
Mm-hmm.
it will also attract people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do a less spoiler cover,
Mm-hmm.
it will also attract people in a
Right.
different way.
Right.
So so like you said, it's a hard balancing act. But I guess if I was to choose, I would lean more on holding back on the spoilers
Yeah.
and more on teasing about what's inside. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily clickbait, but it's somewhat similar to it in a
Yeah.
way that it brings about the flavor of what to expect
Right.
and not much about the story,
Right.
more about the theme
Mm-hmm.
or the images that you can expect to see inside the book,
Right.
something like that.
Right. And that's something that I think about a lot too when doing the promotion is I really like to use images from the art, but not have, the speech bubbles there or the context there. So you're giving
Yeah,
people, an image, but they don't know the context. They don't know how it works in the story. They don't know like how it's ultimately going to work. And so you're engaging their interest without spoiling too much, you hope.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes it becomes a negative thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially in other media like movies,
Mm-hmm.
wherein they show spoilers
Mm-hmm.
in trailers, and then
Mm-hmm.
others show trailers
Mm-hmm.
that does not represent the movie at all.
Right.
It's like you're showing this trailer and then you watch the movie and then what the this is not what the trailer was. So people are already expecting that the trailer is supposed to translate to the movie when
Right.
it's not supposed to. It's just supposed to tease you. But sometimes the marketing goes way overboard
Mm-hmm.
and misleads the people. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't like to do that.
No,
We don't like to do that here.
no, not here.
Not
Yeah,
much.
yeah. It's funny because my son watches a lot of YouTube, and so he'll watch a lot of the spoilers for a movie before he even watches the movie. And I'm like, why
Yeah.
did you do that? Don't you want to go in unspoiled? And he's like, no, I want to know what's going to happen. So,
Yeah.
different people.
You know, I don't really mind spoilers anymore, but
Mhm.
when I do read a spoiler or hear about a spoiler, I go, should have not listened, should have not watched that.
Right,
Because
right.
sometimes it does help the experience,
Mhm.
especially if you're playing a video game and something surprising happens. It
Mhm.
really adds to the experience
Right,
compared to just watching a movie wherein I mean we've seen thousands of movies at this point that it's not surprising anymore.
right,
This guy will do this guy or that guy will do that guy. Especially as
right.
creatives, we've already managed to reverse engineer the way stories are built.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
So
that's very true, unfortunately.
yeah. So for us creatives, it's a bit different when we're watching media or
Right.
other stuff.
Well, and it's also something that you and I have talked about quite a bit, which is, there's this balance between, especially towards the end of a story, you want to still maintain some surprises, but you don't want
Yeah,
to twist it so far that it no longer makes sense with the story that you've told up to that point,
yeah.
and so yeah.
At that point, the expectation will be too different.
Hmm.
It will the readers
Hmm.
will just see the cover and then say this this doesn't do it.
Right,
This has nothing to do with the story at all. That now at that point
right.
you're doing it wrong.
Right.
So
All right.
yeah, thank you for joining us in conversing about covers.
I always like talking about the covers because it's something that I'm so little involved with. So it's
Hey,
cool
you
to.
choose it. You help choose it.
Well, okay, let's walk them through. So the way it works is Ryan comes up with four concepts.
Four
Yep.
four
And
concepts.
and so he presents them, and they're kind of thumbnails, and he
Yep.
talks about what he's shooting for in each one. And
Yeah.
then he sends them to me, and I take a look at them, and I talk about each one, about what I like, what I don't like in each one, and usually we'll narrow it down to about two that I think work.
Yeah. I'll respond and say that yeah, I agree with you on this, and maybe you're not looking at it that
Mhm.
same way as I am on this. And then yeah, maybe we should do this, and then
Mhm.
yeah, we go back and forth about it. And I
Right.
think people don't realize how much collaborative we are with
Yeah.
each issue. So even if I do most of the art,
Mhm.
usually you come to me and say, hey, maybe you could add this to
Mhm.
this panel. You're missing this on this panel. Maybe we
Mhm.
should go with another angle on this
Mhm.
page or something like that. So
Right.
it's the same with me on your writing. And I say, maybe we should make this guy like this, and
Mhm.
maybe we should add this scene on that.
Right.
And I think if if more creatives are open to each other's idea,
Mhm.
the comic will be more successful in that way.
Right.
Because in truth, we don't really have our own editor. I
No.
mean, we have proofreaders or
Mhm.
something like that, but um, it's up to us to
Mhm.
self-edit our own work.
Right.
So it's very important for us to be honest with each other.
Mhm.
And although it's very hard for most creatives to set aside their egos, I
Yes.
mean, creatives are very self-indulgent most of the time,
Yes.
and usually we have these covers
Right.
uh, when we work too close on writing or drawing, we usually don't see the errors, and that's why I don't like looking at my own work because I only see errors when
Yeah.
I look at
Well,
my
I
own work.
I feel the same way when I look at my script. But what I find is when I send you a script, I know there are errors in there, but I can't pinpoint them. Like I can't see them clearly because it's all one big
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it
yeah.
is. And so one of the things that I really like is when you come back, generally you'll pinpoint it to where I need to focus. You'll be like, this his motivation needs to be clearer. This character
Yeah.
is a smart character. He needs to be smart throughout the whole thing. Whatever it is that focuses me, and almost always it's, yes, you're exactly right about that, and now I see it, and I can then process it. I need that pair of eyes to focus
Yeah.
on the things that I need to focus on.
And it's not like you have to do exactly what I suggest.
Right.
It's more like you said, you realize where it's kind of weak, and then
Mhm.
you make it stronger at that
Right.
point. It's not like the I'm saying this doesn't work at all.
Mhm.
It's more like maybe we can make it stronger
Right.
at this point,
Right.
and that really helps the whole story.
Hmm.
It's not like um, if we don't do this,
Hmm.
everything falls apart,
Right.
or if you don't do this, the comic will not be better. It's
Right.
more like if we do this, it will definitely improve
Right. Right. It's
rather than
right. It's like we're already at a certain point. It's just at any time that you can make it that much better, that's great. That's what you want to strive to do as a creative, is to make a better comic. You're not say I don't know anybody who goes into it and says, you know what, I want to make an average comic. I want to make, you know, I want to make an
correct.
okay comic. Everybody wants to
Yeah,
make a great comic, but in order to do it, it's like you said, you need a fresh pair of eyes on it to be able to say, okay, this tweak, I don't understand why he's doing this. If you can improve that, it's going to flow much better. It's
mm-hmm.
it's those things. And one other point on that, and I know we've talked about it before, which is, working on a comic is a really lonely thing. Like I'm over here working on the script, I'm pounding out, what it is. And I'm sure it's the same for you when you're over there drawing, is
Yeah,
we're really the only ones working on this comic, and we're really the only ones who understand it as deeply as we probably do. So one of the things that I really like is when I can throw it to you and say, hey, look, I'm stuck on this plot, or, hey, I have this outline. What do you think? Because that collaboration is what makes the process interesting, is what, it's the give and take of that makes it so much better than just me pounding away on a typewriter, or you just sitting there, chained to your drawing board.
yeah, correct. We're not in a studio where we can just walk in to an
Mhm.
editor and ask him, "Hey, bud, what do you think of this?
Mhm.
Get rid of it.
Mhm.
You suck." It usually takes us weeks or even a month before we even realize uh, where we're doing something wrong, or
Mhm.
we don't feel it's strong enough.
Right.
But it, it usually, I mean, I think if we were working in the same room, we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't complete anything at all.
No,
I'd
we'd
just be
just be sitting
asking
here
you,
talking
"Hey,
the whole
Mike,
time.
come on, let's play a card game or something." So I think this process works better.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we'd probably be like this, where we, spend half an hour just talking about the cover. So,
Right.
okay, yeah. So let's get into the issue. So, in issue 14, we left Ren off, stuck in the soul void, in her spirit form, in this blackness. And one of the things that I thought would be fun was, we always have these previouslys where we tell what happened in the
Mm-hmm.
previous issue. And I kind of think about, okay, which character can I have, tell the previously? And it's always nice to have a character who isn't as engaged in that story. So like last time I had Anton do it, because Anton barely appeared in that issue, and so it was a nice way to get him in, but
Yeah.
here the other characters don't know what's going on over there. Simon is outside, so he's not going to be able to relate too much, and we really needed Ren to say it, and I thought it would be really fun to have her say it, from the black void, because that's kind of what these previouslys are. They're just sitting in a black space. So I thought that'd be a fun thing. So she tells us what happened last issue, and then we're into issue 15. And one of the things that we're doing with this is sort of a callback to the opening of issue 14, where issue 14 was told the first page from Ren's mom's, Mina's, point of view, of her and her father, who is very important to the story. So this time we're hearing it from Ren's point of view, and we've already seen this anecdote from before, from issue 3. And this scene, a lot of people over the years have come to me and asked me about it, like, what did the woman in white really say? It's clear that she said something, and Ren lied on her YouTube feed and said that it was to get a certain number of hits or whatever it was. And so I wanted to come back to that's something that Ren has sort of left unfulfilled, unsatisfied, untaken care of, that she needs to take care of, and so we needed to revisit it, but from her point of view, being honest. And so that's this. And so it's kind of a recap, but it's also kind of, we finally find out the true story, which is that the Caparosa, the woman in white, tells her that the debt is in your blood, it must be made whole.
Yeah. I think some readers have even forgotten about that little detail.
Oh yeah,
it's probably at the back of their minds, but it's pretty cool that it's been revealed now.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that we do a lot in this comic, is because you and I are so immersed in it and all these little details, so we sort of drop them here and then we pick them up 12 issues later. Yeah. And we can do it. And the nice thing is, a lot of readers now are reading it in the trade paperback format. So they're reading like 6 issues at a time. So for them, it's very easy to go back and say, oh yeah, I just read this 3 days ago, or whatever it was. So we're, in a way, we're writing for the trade, but not in the same way that other people are, where they're writing it as, this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you have all the chapters. We do it as an individual story, but we're still doing callbacks to those, so it still works as an ongoing story. Or
correct. So it goes back to what we discussed before, like the X-Files kind of storytelling, wherein you can watch an episode and then you can skip the next, but the overall mythos is still there,
right,
beneath the rest of the story. And then if you actually read it sequentially in either separate issues or the trade paperback, you will see that there's interconnected storylines there.
And I was talking to some other creators about this, and one of the things that you see in indie comics is it's really hard for the audience to stay engaged when you are writing for the trade the way that a lot of people are, that you're only getting a chapter now you have to wait 2 months, 3 months, 4 months for the next issue. It's hard to stay that engaged with exactly what happened to be able to read just the next chapter. And that's one of the things that I think it really works for us in the format that we work in, which is we present you with a new story. There's going to be a beginning, there's going to be a middle, there's going to be an end, so you can just read this issue and enjoy it for what it is, but then you can also put it together with those other ones, like you said, either individual issues or the trade paperback, and enjoy the bigger story.
Yeah, correct. and maybe there are some people who just pick what story they like, and then
Mhm.
eventually they buy the trade paperback, and then
Mhm.
they realize that there's a bigger story there.
Mhm.
So it works out in the end.
I think so. Yeah. So Ren is telling us this story. She's told us what the Caparosa actually says. She tells us about how she has the ability to see into people's pasts. She talks about talking with her mother about the ability and how her mother sort of helped her, but that her mother never told her what to do if she got stuck in someone's memories when they died, which is really
Mhm.
what we're sort of exploring here. And we had this nice page of Ren sort of going through different stages of it, which is, she's shocked, she's angry, she's despairing, she's laughing, she's, and she realizes she has to rely on Simon to rescue her,
Uh-huh.
which, is the whole reason we brought Simon along, is because he's the least likely person to help you out in a situation like this.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. Let me ask you this. So I didn't write a whole lot for the script. I'm like, okay, she's laughing, she's crying, she's tearing at her hair. How do you approach that when you don't have any background to deal with, that you really just have to focus on the character?
Well, I think that's easier actually, because it makes you focus on the emotion of the character. So
Hmm.
you have to make sure that each each panel is very different from the last one,
Hmm.
and it it's all down to sequential art,
Hmm.
wherein you have to express time passing, and then each individual panel has to tell its own story.
Hmm.
So maybe even without the dialogue, it will still make sense on what's happening to her.
Hmm.
I mean, the first panel, she's just standing there, not knowing where she is, and then the
Hmm.
next, she realizes and starts to panic, and then the third, she's calming herself.
Hmm.
Then she's getting frustrated, and then she's going crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty much how my mornings go every day. So I can relate to that. One of the things that you sort of helped teach me about, in dealing with lettering, is the concept of the Z, of how your eyes go.
Mhm.
And you can see it on this panel really clearly, where you go from panel one to panel two to panel three to panel four to panel five. Um,
Mhm.
and you can really see how an eye reads across a comic book page, which is, you read across, you read diagonally, you read across. um so that was cool. It was just, it was a nice visual for me doing it. It's like, oh, now I understand what Ryan was telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's a subconscious thing. Sometimes you do it on purpose.
Hmm.
On this one, you can see that everything is connected.
Hmm.
First panel is connected to the
Yeah.
second is connected to the third is connected to the fourth, and then the last one is disconnected, because that's the panel wherein everything just breaks apart.
Hmm. Including her sanity.
Yep.
Yep.
So
So
it's what Bob Ross says: happy accidents.
and that's very true. Art is a lot of happy accidents, and it's appreciating the accident and embracing it and just sort of running with it has been my experience.
Yeah, but when you're doing it for a long time, it usually tends to be a subconscious thing.
Yeah.
Your mind is hardwired to working in a certain way,
Hmm.
wherein it just automatically does that for you. Sometimes
Right.
it's weird.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so she's cracking up because she knows she has to trust Simon. Simon, who
Mhm.
we last saw deciding to enter into the jungle even though against all better reason to try and help Ren out. And one of the things that I had done prior to either one of these issues was do quite a bit of research about Filipino myths and legends and the aswangs and some of the other creatures. And it's such a rich mythology of creatures. And so when I was approaching Ryan about it, one of the things that I said was, because we have this sort of ash cloud over it, it's always going to be dark, and the light is going to be coming from the weird colors within this. So it's going to be almost like a fantasy world that Simon is entering into to have to deal with. And so sort of threw that at Ryan, sort of told him that there were going to be a number of creatures on the splash page and said, go to it. And this is what you came up with. And I think it's exactly what we were looking for, that we wanted Simon to be this little figure entering this big fantasy world that's just completely overwhelming to him, with the strange colors, the floating fires, the walk bird, all of the creatures there. And it's a great page because you can just stare at it and look at all the little details. And I really do love it. It was the perfect entry point for this issue, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
How did you approach it? Because I did kind of throw quite a lot at you there.
Yeah, well, I just thought that the balete tree was perfect for this, and also bamboo trees, which is not very common in the West, I think. So the forest feel, I had to get it just right without being, sometimes you just tend to draw backgrounds, and then it just pushes back the elements, like the characters, because you're looking at too much background, and it's the clarity. Sometimes you have to think about the clarity too. So I was thinking already of including the capre, the tikbalang, the duende, and they're all very distinct on their own. So I thought that they would carry the image by themselves, even if they're just silhouettes or just tiny little things on the page. So it was, again, it's another balancing act of just doing exact amount of detail without washing out the rest of what's important, like the characters.
Right.
I had to make sure that Simon is right and center, and that he would be clearly seen without shrubbery covering him. So the composition had to I had to make sure that the composition shows that. So you can see that the lines are usually going towards him.
Yep.
And then the creatures are usually, like I said, small or behind the shadow. I mean, if you look at it, they're there, but they're not the focus of the page.
Right.
It just tells you that, yep, this is a mysterious and a fantastical place, but also you should see the dread that Simon is in. So yeah, the threat has to be there.
Right. And it's not just the composition, it's also the way you handle the color. By having Simon's shirt be that sort of it's not quite white, but we know it is, that white bright, that sort of draws my eye as well. So even the color is working, all of the elements are working together to pull you towards Simon first. And then you sort of give yourself the leave to look around at the page and see what else, he's doing. And so you're sort of putting yourself into Simon's place first, and then seeing all these things that he's probably seeing. And I really like it. I think it works really well.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so we're with Simon. The idea is that he's just completely overwhelmed and scared about being here. Think about it. Here's a rational kid. He's great at school. This is probably his worst nightmare is, a dark forest at night with creatures that can't be rationally explained.
Yeah.
Um, and so he's got the walk bird on the duende. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is we've talked about this before is the idea of a trickster is always a fun character to deal with, and so having him have to deal with one and sort of using that as his guide to point to his friend um, Dom and to take him to Dom, I thought would be a fun little way to explore the place that he's in, this magical jungle that he's in, while also having the walk bird sort of staring down at him, ready to eat him at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges for me, and I don't know if it's the same for you, was when you do research, you come back with so much information and you want to include all of it, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be terrible if you do. It's going to read like your science textbook. And so including these elements without um, overwhelming it. So yeah, one of the things is because I'd done so much research, I didn't want to overwhelm it. So we had to sort of give hints at what these things are and leave it to the readers who are really interested to go off and find more. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the idea of the walk bird as being this creature that's over you that is predatory, but you know, let's not get into the whole mythology of it. The
Yeah.
duende, there's so much about duende that I read about, but the part that we sort of focused on was the trickster element and sort of doing that. And again, engaged readers can go off and find out more. There's so much more to be found, and I encourage people to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Because you just end up doing a documentary if you just include every bit of information about them.
Right.
And besides, the information that you do research on is probably just the point of view from one writer to another. So
Mm-hmm.
you really can't include everything about it. But
Right.
the thing is, it's not really about the creatures in the
Mm-hmm.
forest. The
Mm-hmm.
story is not really about that. It's just what populates the place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're right about doing that. I mean, you just show them, and then if you're right, if people are interested in them, they can go research more about it.
Right.
I mean, if we set out a story about discovering about the Philippine mythological creatures
Mm-hmm.
and what makes them tick, uh, I mean, maybe we could do that. We could go deeper into their mythology, but
Right.
that's not really the story here. I
Right.
mean, it's just like Simon. He meets these creatures, but he doesn't really know much about them. I mean, he's
Mm-hmm.
read a bit about it in the book, and that's the thing about Simon. We like to put him in, putting him out of his element,
Mm-hmm.
and then see him squirm. I mean,
Right.
he likes knowing
Mm-hmm.
about the situation he's in, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see him panic a bit when it's a situation wherein he doesn't understand a damn thing.
Right. And the thing that I like about that is the nice thing about Simon as a character is because he acts like that, that's the way that a lot of people would act. A lot of people think that they would act, like the action hero from a superhero movie or whatever, where they would be bold and they would brave and they would do the right thing or whatever. Most of us wouldn't. You put us in this sort of situation, we would panic, we would go nuts, we would say the wrong thing, we would get scared, we would get upset in our stomach. All of those things are, to me, are very real about the situation. And it's one of the things that makes Simon so much fun as a character, is because he feels very believable to me.
I think that's the thing that makes a story great. I
Mhm.
mean, when you put realistic people in fantastical situations,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
I mean, what happens when you put a baker
Mhm.
in a Lovecraftian story?
Right.
It's just like this one. You put
Right.
a normal high school grade A kid and then watch him run around duendes and capres. So what's the worst that could go wrong?
We will find out.
I mean, in slasher films, you see normal high school kids on what do you call that? Spring break,
Yep. Spring break.
and then they go to the lake, and
Mhm.
then this serial killer goes after them.
Mhm.
It's just like that. It's just normal kids
Right.
having fun, and then you put this impossible situation. You
Mhm.
you you put it in front of them, and
Mhm.
then see what happens. It's like a social experiment of some sort. Like, what's the worst thing that could go wrong in a perfect vacation?
Right. But also, that's the fun, and I think, of stories in general, is, that's why we tell stories. That's why we're interested in stories. Is most of our day-to-day life is we're Simon going to school.
Yeah, the
That's
mundane stuff.
right. And but our imagination is what happens when Simon ends up in a fantasy world, or is in a horror thing, or this thing. And so you take this normal kid and put him in extreme circumstances, and that's what's really interesting, because you're taking the normal and taking it a step removed into something
Yeah,
very.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
like that's exactly why people gravitate towards uh, characters that
Hmm.
they like. It's because we like you said, we live in mundane situations, in this mundane world,
Hmm.
and then we like to imagine living someplace else.
Hmm.
Like maybe I want to visit the Philippines, maybe I want to visit Thailand.
Hmm.
What would it be like?
Hmm.
Oh, there's capres and duendes. I mean, it it just tickles the imagination, and
Right.
then that's what we like with stories, is
Hmm.
putting ourselves in situations which we'll never ever find ourselves in real life.
Right.
I
And
think
if
that's
we
the most important thing.
and if we did put ourselves into those situations, we would completely crumble. Our minds would fall apart. We And so, yeah,
Correct, correct.
that's the fun of
And
it.
that's why we like that's why we like piloting characters. Like,
Right.
don't run there, stupid! Don't run there.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's the fun part of this. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, so Simon's following the duende. Meanwhile, Ren is still, completely losing it. And who happens to turn up but the Caparosa, the woman in white, who had
Mhm.
visited her way back when she was a kid in her New York apartment, and um, comes and grabs her and pulls her along. And one of the things that we had talked about when wanting to do this story was wanting to get much more involved in that sort of backstory of Ren and the Caparosa, and why exactly the Caparosa had visited Ren and sort of bestowed this gift or brought this gift out of Ren, whatever, however it worked. Why was that important? And this is sort of starting to move us towards that.
Mhm.
So the Caparosa grabs Ren and brings her through the pool to this time of this scene. And we're not quite sure. um Ren knows that, because of her nature, she knows that she's in a memory, and so she's
Uh-huh.
looking up and seeing this girl crying. And what we find out is that the girl is the one who had put the plague on the boy from issue 3, that the worms had come out of his skin, and we find out that she had gone to Ren's uncle Ario, gotten him to do it, but he tricked her. He didn't tell her how bad it was going to be, and that as part of the deal that they made, he's going to turn her over to the Aswang. And of course, she doesn't want to. And while this is playing out, Ren and the Caparosa are viewing this from inside the pool at their feet. This was a complicated bit of storytelling, to visual storytelling, and I was so excited about the prospect of giving it to you to draw it, because I thought it could be so interesting, the visual dynamics of the girl on top and the Caparosa underneath, and being, mirror images of one another. And I think you did a great job of it, but I can't imagine it was easy to figure out exactly the mechanics of who was where and when and how you see it. So how did you approach that storytelling?
Yeah, definitely, because the hardest thing about visualizing written script is actually the composition of the panels. And given, you'd think that you have so much space in a panel, but when you start actually sketching it out, you tend to run out of space. And in that way, you have to also think about which panel to focus on, which to make bigger. I mean, it's a whole other discussion. But anyway, for this one, I had different ideas about it. I mean, do I make it watery, make it wavy, and or do I make it glass-like? And I settled for the glass-like because they're in a spirit world. So it's not like they have this lens looking up above the water, below the water, and at the same time you're not looking at them, at the water itself.
Right.
So I wanted it clear that they're on separate planes, on separate dimensions. So we've already established in the last pages that this void, this soul void, is pure black.
Right.
I mean, that was the description for the last panel in issue 14.
14, that's right.
So I wanted to make that. Carry over here. So that's very important when you're composing a panel. You have to be consistent with some details. You can't change on the fly because, believe it or not, some readers are very prone to getting disoriented. So you have to always assume that your readers are that there's a chance that your reader can be a first-time comic book reader. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So, I mean, to some people, they might say, "These guys are drawing these comics like I was a 5-year-old." Well, that's exactly the point, because there could be a 5-year-old. Well, don't read this if you're 5-year-olds.
We don't get 5-year-olds, but we do get like 8 or 9-year-olds. I will say that.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be that same exact age. I mean, you can be 50 and this could be your first comic book.
Right.
And sometimes it can be disorienting to follow which panel to read first or which word balloon to read first. Right. So the consistency helps trick the mind into thinking that they're still in this place, right? They were in the spirit void before the soul void. They're still in the void, right? They're not under the water.
Right.
It's that mentality. So For the second panel, this was a bit trickier because the script wanted to show the Capirosa and Ren. At the same time, it had to show Ario and the girl.
Right.
It was very difficult. I tried so many other compositions, and I settled for this one.
Yeah.
Because if I had done the other compositions, it would focus too much on the girl and Ario, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to focus on the Capirosa and Ren.
Right.
So the best way was to just show the feet of the side characters, even though they're the ones who are supposed to be talking, right?
Right.
It's just like in coloring. Sometimes the person in front is not actually the focus. So what you do is put a filter over that character to make it darker from the people who are actually talking.
Right.
And that way you put focus on them. It's the same way here.
Well, and I imagine that's hard because the Caparosa and Ren in this form are always going to be the brightest characters, and so they're probably always going to draw your eye.
Yeah.
One thing I do like about that second panel is the way that you had the leaves floating on it to really convey the water. It's such a subtle touch, but it really cements the idea that they're to the girl and Ario, they're standing over water, which maybe a reader wouldn't catch if you didn't have those leaves. I really like that little touch that you added.
Correct. That's what I was talking about before. Like, do I put waves on this? Do I put ripples on this? Because if I put ripples on it, it would make people think that they're underwater.
Right.
Or that the reflections. You know what I mean? I wanted it. I wanted it to feel like they're still in that soul void. So it's still completely dark. But at the same time, I wanted it to be just like what the script asked for, that they're like reflections on the water.
Right.
So the best way to convey that this is water is to put debris on it. So things like leaves, which is the easiest way to convey that it's something floating above something that is reflective. It could be water, it could be glass, it could be anything.
Well, and I'm probably reading too much into these things because I tend to do that, but I also like the leaves because it connotes, a fall, the dying of the leaves, them crumbling, these things being thrown away, which is really kind of what this scene is about, that this girl is being thrown away, that she's going to end up dead, all of this. And the leaves, in the water, it's the same thing, like she's going to end up in the water. So I just, I really like it. It's a little symbol. It's a little thing that just worked so well for me.
Well, that's the lovely thing about comic books and media in general, is that people are free to translate whatever it is on the page to whatever it is they want.
Right.
I mean, some people can just find enjoyment with the story as it is, while others can find deeper meanings into it. And that's the thing that really separates what normal readers who just want entertainment to people who really get hooked into something and makes them fans of that work. Is that they find deeper meaning into it.
Right. And that's the good thing about comics. The best comics, and we've talked about this before, are the ones that you can go back and reread and you can find new things in. And I certainly think our comic is one of those. I certainly hope it is. And I know that people have told me that they've reread the comic a few times. So I think it's working for them.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about the idea of kind of, you know, with so many panels on the page, you sort of have to come up with a central image, and we've sort of talked about this before. And this next page is kind of a great example of that, where that middle image of the caparosa and the girl as mirror images on this sort of diagonal. It just, that is exactly what this whole thing is about, that they are the mirror image of one another, and that there's these two different time periods are going on at the same time, which is something that we do a lot, which is, you know, this girl is very much in this memory, but it's happening real time for her, exactly as it's happening real time for Ren talking to the caparosa who is already dead. But I love that middle panel. It's, you know, it's one of those striking images that there are times when I'm writing a script that I write these panels, and I specifically write them with the idea of, I'm going to throw this at Ryan and see what he can come up with, and I'm just going to make it crazy, and I'm going to throw it at him and see what he can do. And
you don't
almost
want to see me crazy.
I love the crazy. You know, the crazy is my favorite part. So I throw it at you, and I'm just always amazed at what you do with it and pull out of it and turn it into something great. And I'm reading a comic right now, a kind of famous Vertigo comic, and it's literally people talking nonstop. It's one head, two heads, one head, two heads, just nonstop. And it's such boring storytelling that this is why, I hope that people appreciate about the comic that I do, which is the visual storytelling is so much better because you do things like this that pull it out, and just it draws me in as someone just to appreciate the art.
Well, like you said, sometimes you have to think of the central panel. But in this case, I think it was written clearly in the script that this was supposed to be the central image.
Yeah.
The only problem I saw with this one was that it was going to be cramped. It was either I was going to make this a vertical image, but I already committed the first two images on top because I thought that looked best. So I thought, what could be the best way to do this? So I settled for making it tilt a bit in a way that the horizontal panel becomes a vertical panel in a way. And at the same time, it kind of makes you think that, this image from the last image, we're kind of tilting it now so that we're on the other side.
Right.
It's like a visual from a movie wherein the whole camera rotates. So that's the feeling I was going for. And most artists shy away from challenging images like this, not knowing that by doing this kind of pages, you improve your art in a way that you sometimes we get trapped in our little what do you call this? We get we draw in a way that we're used to, and
Your
we
habits.
usually don't. You don't usually think of thinking out of the box because you're thinking of economical ways of going through the pages, and these kinds of panels really help elevate your skills.
Yeah.
So if you're an artist, if you're a budding artist, you should really compliment your writer when they throw something like this at you instead of cursing them.
It's okay.
No. This is actually a fun panel to do because it helps convey. Actually, I treat this as two separate panels.
Yeah, you can.
So the left side is one panel and the other side is, you can think of it that way. If it's too hard to visualize a script, you can always split the panel like that and still treat it as one panel. I mean, we did a fan comic before in which I was limited to doing only 2 panels per page.
I remember that
You
one.
remember that?
Yep.
And there was this panel in which it was actually telling 3 separate stories. So for that panel, I treated it like it was 3 different panels that is connected into one. So
yeah, you just don't have the panel.
That's one way. That's one way of visualizing written script into actual drawing.
Yeah. You mentioned about the diagonal, which I think is a really smart choice. You know, having worked in graphic design, what putting things at an angle does is it throws the viewer out of their comfort zone. It makes them almost feel like they're falling, like they're not on solid ground. And which is exactly what's going on for all of the characters in this scene. You know, this girl is not on solid ground. She's about to lose her life. For Ren, she's figuring out what's going on, and her whole world is being thrown out of balance. You know, and so I love it when you put things at an angle, because it makes the reader, it takes the reader out of their comfort zone. You know, readers are used to looking at people standing upright or lying down. They're not used to seeing the ground being at a diagonal. And when you throw them out of a comfort zone, especially in a horror comic, that's exactly what you want them to do. You don't want them to feel comfortable at this point. You want them to feel very uncomfortable at this point. So to put them into the story.
Yeah, well, we discussed that before with action scenes, wherein I tend to tilt the image because it kind of conveys that the camera is being handheld, and then because the action is either too violent or too intense, that the cameraman kind of jilts to one side like that. But in this case, like what you were telling before about the talking heads in panel wherein they just talk and talk and talk. Sometimes you have to change up the angle of the panel just to put interest to it. So even if they're just talking, just by tilting it a bit, you already increase the intensity of the panel.
Yeah.
Like the camera is panning or something like that. It's not like an interview wherein there's a solitary camera right in front of you and it's not moving at all. You're composing this 300-page epic, and then it's just this guy talking in front of the camera. It's not a vlog. It's not a blog or anything like that. It's a story. It's moving character. So you have to convey that. You have to show that the camera is moving around, tilting around. So it just helps bring up more interest to the panel or the page.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And it
also also it helps point towards the next panel. So
Good job. Good job. Okay, so Ren learns that the Caparosa was this girl, got killed, that she suspects that when when Caparosa is telling her that the debt is in your blood, that you have to make it right, that this is the debt, that Ario, her uncle, killed the girl, turned her into the Caparosa, and so Ren has to make it right, that this is her debt, that as the sort of surviving member of the family, the youngest generation, she's the one who has to make it right, which is sort of what this whole big 2-issue story is, you know, making things right. So let me see. Meanwhile, oh, sorry,
about
go ahead.
That, about that. I mean, this whole blood is the death is in your blood thing. it all ties down to what we discussed about this story arc.
Yep.
I mean, we were trying to come up with a theme for the story, and I suggested that since we're setting this in the Philippines, I suggested that maybe we should put elements of the telenovela, which is very, very popular here. It's, I mean, if people in the West are familiar with Spanish telenovela, I think they'll have an idea on what I'm talking about, because it's practically the same here. So it's this melodramatic thing, wherein family is embroiled in this whole mess. I wanted us to tell that kind of spin that kind of tale, wherein generations of family members are the cause of your problems and this kind of thing. I mean, it's not really realistic, but
no, but it's good storytelling.
Yeah, it's telenovela. You know, it's over dramatics.
Right. So, there's a reason telenovelas work, is because these are classic stories that people are used to and engage in. You know, how often is it that something happens and the twist is, I'm your father. It's his mother. Oh, well, you know.
Yeah. There's always elements of it in movies and books, but it's really subtle.
Yeah.
If you do it right, you can make it very subtle, and people will just brush it away and think, hey, that was actually good, but they don't realize that it's actually just tropes. It's just storytelling tools that writers have, that we use all the time, because like you said, it's effective. You don't have to change it just because you need to change it. If you can do it in a interesting way or in new way, then go for it. And for this one, we wanted it to be bombastic. We wanted it to be over dramatic, melodramatic, just like a telenovela. Go balls out with it.
And we did. And you know, we'll talk more about that when we get to the ending, about how balls out we went with it.
I just wanted to point that out.
I think that's exactly right.
People might think, what, blood is in your, the death is in your blood. That's telenovela shit right there.
But it's also, you know, horror in general and fantasy in general are sort of, you know, these big operatic moments of, like, you know, oh, this and that, you know, it's Shakespeare, it's, you know, Thor.
It's theater.
It's theater. It's theater. Okay. So meanwhile, the Duende has led Simon to Ren's unconscious body, and Dom standing over it, and Uncle Ario dead in the background. And Simon has to make a choice. You know, what does he do? Does he stay with Ren, or does he follow Dom? And ultimately, he knows he can't help out Ren here, so he's got to follow Dom and find out what's going on. And so he follows Dom through the jungle, who leads us up the mountain to this glowing woman who has a gigantic knife sticking out of her chest. And Dom is attempting to use the Adjamat amulet that we've seen from issue 3 to try to cure this woman, you know. And he's using a Catholic saying to try and get her to do it, and it's not working. It's just not effective. And who does Simon see to the side? But there's Mina, Ren's mom, as well as Natalia's mother, who's over, or actually, I'm sorry, Dom's mother, who's over there as well. And so, you know, Mina recognizes the amulet as being Ren's, and wants to know what Dom has done to Ren in order to take it. And Dom is, of course, very upset. He is trying to solve the situation. To him, it's, he's got to be the one to do it, to solve the situation, to protect the village. And so while he's doing that, Simon goes over and unties Mina and Dom's mom. I personally like the line about how Mina is shocked that Simon's the one who's there to do it, and it's like, Ren says you are the worst person in the world, and Simon's just like, oh yeah, all my friends say that.
That's what I like about Simon.
Mm-hmm.
He's so self-aware of himself.
Mm-hmm. But he doesn't take it too seriously. Like, all of the social aspect that all of us take too seriously, Simon doesn't take seriously enough. It's like,
well, it's also because of his self-belief in himself, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, in the previous issue, we saw him debating and fighting with himself about going into the jungle. I mean, he knows how bad things will get, but if it doesn't, Ren will be in bigger trouble.
Right. And that's
that really speaks about Simon's character.
Right. And why he's an interesting character, because he's not the guy who immediately rushes in. Maybe Matt would, maybe Alex would, maybe Sarah would, but Simon,
Matt would definitely just rush in. I mean, he's very impulsive.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Crash.
Yeah, he's Crash. Of course he would. But
Simon is more analytical.
Right.
He tends to think more about the situation before jumping in.
Right. And that's the great thing about it. But ultimately, he does jump in, which is the nice thing about Simon. Because I don't know if at the start of our series, if he would have jumped in. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, I remember some people disliking Simon in the first few issues because they thought, this guy was just an asshole, or didn't care, or thought too highly of himself, which are all true, but he's got a cavalier side to him. I mean, it's never too simple to describe a character.
Right.
I mean, people tend to think that because one character did this, this is his entire character.
Right.
But no. I mean, maybe because, like I said, people are used to reading miniseries, trade paperbacks, and that sort of stuff, that there's really enough space to tell character development.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's the beautiful thing about comic books and media in general, is to see people grow from this person in the very first issue to what he is now.
Right.
So whether you like him or not, he will progress.
Right.
Into a different person.
Right. And even what he is now is not the end of the story,
Yeah, I mean, I meant he's not really changing. It's just that we're seeing more of him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
His character is revealed slowly throughout the series.
Right. One of the things that they say is that character is choice. It's like, what choice does someone make in this situation? And then you take them to another choice. And what did they choose to do in this next situation? And that's how you learn about who this character is by their choices. And I don't, with me, with my choices, sometimes they're the right choice, sometimes they're the wrong choice. Sometimes I make the selfish choice. Sometimes I make the honorable choice, or what I think is the honorable choice. It's, a person is not as you said, it's not one thing. A person makes so many choices, and some of them are good and some of them aren't, and that's how you find out about a character. And that, as you said, they're not simple.
Yeah, and with the way the Ren's mom asked that about Simon, also kind of tells about how people are perceived
Right.
in society. I
Right.
mean, you listen to one side and they tell you that, hey, this guy is like this, but really he's like this. From
Right.
If you ask other people, no, actually he's like this.
Right.
So, like you said about the leaves, you can look at the story the way we intended you to see, and then in another way you can also see the characters in a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
That there are characters that you think are this way but actually are not that bad.
So Dom notices what Simon is doing and chases him away down the mountain. Simon sort of falls and lands on the back of the Tikbalang, which is the horse-headed guy, who immediately starts trying to throw Simon off. And, Simon, being, scared to death, decides to hold on tighter. And off they go. That sends us back to Ren and the Caparosa. So the Caparosa is telling Ren again, the dead is in your blood. It must be made whole. And so the Caparosa is taking Ren and bringing her to the pool where Ren's body was next to. And Ren is climbing out of the pool, and there is her mom standing next to her body. By the way, I love the way you composed this one, because again, this is not an easy thing to do, which is to have the Caparosa and Ren be floating, going down, and then back up into the next panel. I love the way that you did that. I can't imagine that was easy.
It is.
Okay, well then
you just make lines. Yeah. No, actually, yeah, it's a bit tricky, but you have to focus on something. Like on this one, again, the main image is the third panel, so everything has to point towards that panel. So from the first panel, you have to convey that they are falling down or they're heading down, and then the spot where they're supposed to be going has to be clearly seen, and then the line helps convey movement,
right?
But at the same time, it's also a pointer towards the next panels. But since the third panel, you can see that the Caparosa is looking up. So immediately your eyes strict to looking towards that panel instead of looking down below to the the fourth panel.
Yeah.
And also, since Ren is climbing up, your mind kind of makes the decision for you to tell you that, yep, this is the next panel over here. And that's why I didn't want to make it watery, because of this scene. Ren climbing out. If it was watery, where is the wet thing coming out, right? She should be wet, but she's not, because she's not in water. She's in the void.
Well, and she's not physical. I mean, she's a spirit. So yeah, and one is so Ryan does the art, I do the lettering, and as to do the lettering, I'm trying to follow what Ryan has done with the lines, and so using Ren's dialogue there and connecting it from panel 2 to panel 3 to help, as you talked about, to sort of hold the reader's hand who maybe hasn't read a comic before, to lead them to that next panel and where they're supposed to read next. So hopefully they're reading, that the balloon from panel 2, and then following that to the balloon in panel 3 that's way down here in the panel, and not reading at the top of the panel. It's very true, and it's something that's hard to do, which is, again, to think both in terms of, we want to do this complex storytelling, but also we have to expect that certain readers aren't there, that we have to sort of lead them to there. And so using those tools, like you said, having the eyes pointing a certain direction, to have the lines pointing in a certain direction, and also having the balloons go in a certain direction. It's all trying to work together to do that same thing.
Correct, because everything is working together, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Also in terms of coloring. I mean, I never stop editing until coloring. I still continue editing. So the pencil pages, that if you have access to the pencil pages, you will see that some characters will look different in the ink pages, and then I will continue seeing errors when I'm flatting or coloring, and then I'd still make editing during that time. So you're constantly editing. You're constantly making it look better.
Right. It's the same with the writing. It's one of the reasons I like doing the lettering, is because that same process that you're going through is the same process I'm going through. I'm fiddling with the dialogue. Almost always there's too much dialogue for a panel, and I'm constantly trimming, a line here, 3 words there, whatever I can to make it smaller to fit. But also, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I don't need to say this. Ryan has shown this in the art. Let the art say it, so I can get rid of that piece of dialogue. Or, I need to, something happened between here and here that I need, again, to hold somebody's hand on. And so the dialogue needs to convey that. It's a constant editing process, a rewriting process, up until the last moment when we send this to the printer.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ren, in her spirit form, climbs out, and we find out that her mom can see her and can talk to her. I made this choice because I realized that if we didn't have the mom be able to see her, nobody was going to be able to talk to Ren the entire rest of the issue. So we needed somebody to be able to communicate. But it also worked well for the character, which is where we're going to. And if you're listening to this commentary, you've already read the issue, hopefully, which is that what's in the blood is not just a debt. It's the blood of the Diwata is in the blood. And so the abilities, the powers, whatever you want to call them, are in that side of the family. So of course her mom would be able to see her, because her mom would have part of that within her. Yeah. So I made a decision for a storytelling reason, but also made a decision for a character reason. And so, hope that it's kind of like you said before, it's those things that you do subconsciously, and you're like, okay, you just have to trust the process that it's going to work. Yeah.
Right.
So then we're back with Simon on the Tikbalang. The Tikbalang.
The Tikbalang.
Tikbalang?
Yes.
Okay. I am going to butcher it because I'm terrible with names anyway.
No, it's all right, but you don't have to speed it up. Just call it. The Tagalog is very. What do you call this? What do you call that? The way we phrase it is very much like the it's just what the letters indicate. So it's tik ba lang.
Tikbalang. Phonetically?
Yeah, phonetically.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's not going to matter much longer because they go in the tree trunk and it changes form into Hagravida. Man, I'm gonna butcher names all night.
Now that one I don't know. Hayagriva?
Hayagriva. Yeah, let's say that.
Hayagriva?
Yeah, people, who know the Hindu mythology are going to come back and just say, we did a terrible job on these pronunciations.
Yeah.
So again, we were making storytelling decisions, but also based upon research. And the thing that I had seen suggested that 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 some of the mythology of the Philippines is based upon its location and how people have visited it over, centuries. And it's not just the Spanish who, are the most recent visitors or whatever. Before that, there were Hindu traders, there were Indian traders coming throughout there, and they brought their culture and they left certain parts. And the idea was that maybe the Tikbalang was inspired by this Hindu figure of Hagravida. And so, but also, so there was that, but also for our storytelling, Simon is getting ready to go to India. He's getting ready to go see his grandfather, who is immersed in Hindu beliefs and mythology. And so the way that we could tie those pieces together through this, and by visiting the dreamlands where they are, hopefully make this work with the stories that are going to come. Which is exactly what happens next, because Hagravida offers to show Simon the future. And so brings out the lotus blossom and shows this image of the future. Before we get there, let me ask you, because this is kind of a departure. We said, okay, we're doing this Filipino location, basis in this mythology, and suddenly why don't you draw some Hindu mythology while you're at it? How do you approach that when you see that in a script?
Yeah, because from the previous page where we see Hayagriva, okay, you can roast me on that.
Yeah.
We already see that half of him is still Tikbalang,
yep.
And the other part is Hayagriva.
Right.
And at that point, I had to make it visually different from the previous panel, which is obviously the dream. It's supposed to be the dreamlands, but it's still not that obvious. Aside from the what do you call those rat things again?
The zoogs.
I forgot. The zoogs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that visual element, you'll never even know that we're in the dreamlands right now.
Right.
Right.
And the stairway in the background.
Is there a stairway in the background?
Is that not the stairway in the background?
Oh, in the next panel. No, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, the next panel.
In the next panel, we see that there are glowing lights, and then the sky has those stars.
Right.
So already you're aware that you're in another place. That this is not the Philippine jungles anymore.
Right.
And the script clearly says that the Tikbalang was ship changing into Hayagriva anyway.
Right.
And people might say that no, the Tikbalang wasn't derived from Indian mythology, but it's that creative license that is used here. Right. But at the same time, I've always thought of gods as some sort of representation
Mm-hmm.
of uh, of things.
Mm-hmm.
So if the mythologies of the Philippines was adapted from something, like, for example, the aswang has a form of a
Mm-hmm.
dog.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it's not like every aswang is supposed to look like a certain thing. So there
Right.
are some places wherein the aswang is supposed to look like a vicious dog.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine if you were in World War II Philippines, wherein the Japanese were still occupying the country.
Yeah.
Imagine if here's another word, the hukbalahap, which was supposed to be the resistance, the
Yeah.
Filipino resistance in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines at that time,
Mm-hmm.
dressed up as dogs,
Mm-hmm.
like that was their camouflage.
Right.
The Japanese would think, is this the aswang that the Filipinos were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just perception.
Right.
It's just perception that people think that one thing can mean for one person and it
Mm-hmm.
can mean another for another person.
Right.
So in this case, for Simon, because he is not really familiar with the Tikbalang,
Mm-hmm.
this God, whoever it is,
Mm-hmm.
because if if people will remember,
Mm-hmm.
the gods here
Mm-hmm.
are exist only in the dreamlands.
Right.
They exist only in the minds of people.
Right.
So Hayagriva, whatever he looks like in real life,
Mm-hmm.
is appearing to Simon the way he is. That is familiar to Simon.
Right. Right.
So so maybe in the Philippines he likes to appear like the Tikbalang,
Mm-hmm.
but when they're in the dreamlands, he appears as Hayagriva for Simon. We don't
Right.
even know if this is the real Hayagriva.
Right.
It could be uh, it could be an elder god.
Right.
It can be a servitor of an elder god.
Yep.
It can be Narliatotep, for all we
Right.
know.
For all we know.
For all we know.
Right. Yeah. One of the and I think you and I think similarly about that, especially through the lens of the dreamlands, that anything can be real in the dreamlands, but it's the way that I think we talked about it was the dreamlands is kind of the meeting place for a lot of different things. Some
Yeah.
of them are humanities, a lot of them are not, but they
Mm-hmm.
all need to sort of be able to function together. And where that happens is in the dreamlands.
Yeah.
So you're going to run into a lot of things, and they're not really what you necessarily see in the dreamland.
It's like
It,
a conduit
yeah,
to other worlds.
exactly.
It's like the internet for other dimensions.
Right, right. And the way it appears there for Simon is not the way that it would appear there for somebody else. That
Right.
that here is this figure who's going to tell him about the future, who has a certain representation of enlightenment, or knowledge, or whatever it is. To Simon, of course, because of his background, this is how he would see it. This is one of his favorite um, Hindu figures from when he was a kid, because it does represent mentality and the idea that thought is at the highest, intellect and things like that. So of course this would be how he would visualize it. So maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the way that the dreamlands affects them. But yeah, exactly that. That if gods are going to exist, they're going to exist in the dreamlands, and
Right.
that's the place where our characters can interact with them.
Right.
Right.
It's
So
it's very tricky to think
yeah.
about it at first, but the ambiguousness of it is what
Mhm.
makes it more interesting, I think.
Right, but also that we're building it up, that we've been in the dreamlands at least once, and we've gotten some idea of it. And every time we go back, we learn a little bit more, and we see it in new
Yeah,
ways,
yeah.
and we start to understand more of it.
It's just like the Caperosa.
Mhm.
For many issues we don't know anything about her.
Mhm.
We barely even see her, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden we answer
Mhm.
the questions in this issue.
Mhm.
And at the same time, we ask more questions. We present more questions. We present more mysteries.
Yeah, it's
So I
kind
guess
of hard not
it's
to.
just something the readers will have to get used to.
But I also think that by this point, readers expect that of us, and that's probably what they like about the storytelling is, that it is something that comes back. But it's also it's it's a broad world that we're creating. We're not creating this one tiny sliver, or we're not just telling this one component of Lovecraft or even all of Lovecraft, where it's much bigger than that we're trying to deal with, even if the
Yeah,
Lovecraft is sort of the entry point.
and I've seen some say that this is not really Lovecraft. This is
Mhm.
Philippine mythology. Is not Lovecraft. Lovecraft is supposed to be cosmic horror.
Right.
Well, we have the Dreamlands here, so
Right.
we're not really sure if Hayagriva right here is really Hayagriva.
Right.
It could be, like I said, it can be Nyarlathotep. You were
Right.
talking about the trickster.
Hmm.
We can never really tell what's going on here.
Right. And that's the fun part of it. And I hope readers are appreciating that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and speaking of the trickster, so Hayagriva shows Simon this image of the future of his grandfather basically trying to stop him from telling the Simon of right now that it was the grandfather who did it all along, that he arranged it from the beginning. And the grandfather tells him, shut up, boy. Um, do you not realize you cannot change time? And really, if there's anything that's Miskatonic high, it's time travel. It's we're dealing with different elements of time and how they're going to play out. And so, what does this mean? Well, you're just going to have to wait and find out. Because
Yeah. Issue 50, we promise.
yeah, yeah, only what 4 more issues. Just wait. Um, so Hayagriva, Simon wants to know the answers of what's going to happen, and Hayagriva has none of them for him and just tosses him out. um, well, when you have that many arms, I guess it's easy to throw people out of a tree trunk.
Nah, I'm pretty sure he kicked him out.
Yeah. He got thrown out of the club. Um, okay, and so now we're back with Ren and Mina, and Ren is going into her mom's memories to find out exactly what happened. And so we see that Ario used Mina to draw out the Diwata, and then stabbed the Diwata with the knife, which caused her to go completely crazy and set off the volcano and basically all the things that got us to where we are today. The Ario tells Mina that he's not her brother, not full brother, that
Mhm.
that Mina had a different mother. And
Mhm.
Mina doesn't know whether to trust Ario or not on this. And
Yeah.
so, because if you were told something by a guy who's clearly deranged, would you believe
Yeah.
him? Yeah. So, but fortunately, they have another chance to find out, and that's by following the grandfather's spirit, which is what Ren started to do at the end of issue 14. That
Mhm.
he is still on his quest to get the gift from the Diwata that's going to protect the village from the Aswang. That's the whole reason Ren got into this mess, following the grandfather and ultimately ending up in the soul void and all that, is because she's trying to find out what this gift is that they can use to defeat the Aswang.
Mhm.
So they follow along the grandfather. The grandfather is humming, which is what Mina also does. That they both have been humming this tune, which we have told you about now twice from the very beginning page on in issue 14, and now the same one in issue 15. That both the grandfather and Mina the mother sing that hum this song. Um, the grandfather spirit leads them to the Diwata, and what we find out is that the Diwata's gift was Mina. That all along that the grandfather and the Diwata had a baby. The baby is Mina, and Mina is the gift that's going to protect the village from the Aswang.
Yeah.
So when she abandoned the village, of course it threw things into disarray. Of course it led to this whole thing that ultimately the village is in.
So
Um,
yeah, it connects very much to the idea of a telenovela. It's
mhm.
very, very melodramatic in a
It is
way.
very melodramatic.
I mean, it's usually telenovelas are about families and
Mhm,
their connections and how people resist the idea of following their destinies
mhm.
only to end up, you know, ruining things for
Right.
the whole family. And
Yeah.
in a way, I think the story really kind of reminds me of that telenovela
Mhm.
aspect that we were going for.
Right.
There's babies, there's betrayals.
Yep. There's killing of family members. There's
Yeah,
yeah, all of that.
and
Um,
multi generations.
right. But what I also like is the Caparosa is telling Ren that she has a duty, which is the same thing that basically they're telling Mina is that you had a fate all along, a duty that you were supposed to do that you abandoned. And that's why things are messed up. But the way that you solve it is by doing your duty now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's very much a trope, but I hope it works. It works for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that Mina feels guilty for having left. That she failed her parents. In the same way that maybe Ren feels like she hasn't fulfilled her duties, to the Caparosa. So um back to Simon, who is being chased up the mountain by all the creatures. Um, we had talked about this before that really we had split issue 14 and issue 15, and the idea was issue 14 they were going to deal with one Aswang, and it was going to be sort of like Alien where you deal with one alien, and then
Mm-hmm.
issue 15 was going to be where they start coming out of the woodwork and there's tons of them, and it's a lot scarier because it's like aliens. And so all of the creatures are converging on the mountain. They're all basically chasing Simon up the mountain, um, to where the Diwata is. He runs up, and there's Dom. Dom is completely upset at himself. He is a failure. His one
He's he's feeling defeated.
yeah. He has always told himself that he is supposed to be the protector of the village, and he hasn't been able to do it. It's still all a complete mess. And so he says, okay, you know what, I'm not going to bother with all of this now. I'm going to go down and do my best to stop the creatures from coming up this hill as long as I can, even though I know that this is going to be the end for me, and you guys are just going to have to figure it out. And I like those sort of um what do you call it, that arc of restoring him, of him finding the best part of his nature.
Redemption
Yeah,
stories.
yeah, I like redemption stories a lot, and I hope that Dom's little redemption here works. That ultimately he's trying to do what he's always tried to do, which is to protect the village, and he's just doing the best he can, and even though it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah, I really like Dom's character actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's not perfect. He's
No.
very anti-hero in a way,
Yeah, but
but
at
he's
the
pretty
same
cool.
but at the same time, he is a hero because I mean, this, he's he's ultimately like the rest of the characters.
He's
Ultimately,
doing things that people are not prepared to do.
right, and he's doing his duty. He always wanted to be the guy who would deal with the supernatural elements to protect the village, and here at his final moment, that's exactly what he's doing.
Mhm.
He's even though it's not going to be enough to protect the village, it's what he can do, and so he's going to do
Yeah,
it. Yeah. I also like all these creatures coming up the mountain because it feels like that they're so overwhelming that ultimately you know it's Ren and Simon, the Diwata with a blade sticking out of it, and
yeah,
Mina, and somehow they have to stop all these monsters. um
and it's a lot of them.
it's a lot of them. Yeah, I'm sorry. So meanwhile, up at the top, Ren and Mina are trying to figure out, how are they going to get the Diwata to fixed, I guess is the best way to say it. Um, and they're trying to think because they know that there was um, something about the enchanted, something from the book that Simon had read about what they were supposed to, that is about restoring the balance.
Mhm.
Um, and just as they're trying to talk to Simon to figure it out, that's when the Aswang attacks. Um, it grabs onto Mina and is basically killing her. Um, Ren can't do anything because she's in her spirit form and has no physical ability to do anything. And Simon loses the amulet and gets thrown down the mountain. So all Ren can do is yell at Simon. So she yells at him to run down and get it. He runs down, comes back up, and we think he's going to have the amulet, but what he's done is grab Dom's bamboo knife and stabs the Aswang in the middle of the back, which we had told readers about in issue 14 is how you deal with an Aswang, and he does it. And rather than feeling big and victorious and brave and bold, he throws up, which again is probably what I would do if I had stabbed something in the back and then it immediately died. Um, but of course, Ren, being who she is this isn't good enough. Simon is supposed to be answering her questions. Um, and so he remembers about the Encanto, the Enchanted, that they are supposed to bring balance by singing their song. Um, Ren and Mina are like, okay, what song are we supposed to sing? And Ren's like, well, the song that you're always humming, obviously. And Mina's like, well, how are we supposed to sing it? And Ren says, how else? From the heart. And that's how we get to this wonderfully crazy, insane splash page of Ren and Mina singing the Diwata coming back to life, and all of these Aswan creatures dealing with the light and the stars and the hearts and the music. Um, yeah.
Going
Um,
out with a bang.
um, we had talked about this quite a lot. That this was one of the ideas that you had thrown out to me. That what if the ending, rather than some battle or something like this, was a song that they sing, and that the singing is what saves the day.
Well,
mhm,
yeah. Aside from the telenovela that we discussed before,
mhm,
another aspect of Filipino culture that I suggested we include
mhm.
was the singing.
Yeah.
Filipinos love singing,
Yeah, you had
so
mentioned it from
it's
way back when we were coming up with Ren as a character at the very beginning, that she was
yeah,
going to be a singer. Yeah.
and that's another aspect of it.
Mhm,
Ren is an aspiring singer. Well,
mhm.
she is a singer in a
Yeah.
way, and I've always been thinking of a way to utilize that
Mhm,
in the story.
mhm,
And when this storyline came out,
mhm,
I thought it would be the perfect avenue for that,
mhm,
and so I suggested it.
mhm.
I think some people are aware that I'm a Macross fan,
Yep.
and one of the aspect of that show,
Mhm,
if you watch the original and the uh, Americanized version, is
mhm,
that there's a character there named Min Mei,
mhm,
and in battling this giant race of aliens,
mhm,
instead of using their technological prowess
mhm,
and military might,
mhm.
what actually defeated those aliens were the singing of this very ordinary girl,
Yeah.
and that kind of resonated with me even when I was younger. That something so small can be so powerful.
Mhm.
And when I thought about it more, songs are actually not that small. It's actually a thing that connects cultures together.
Yeah.
It actually connects the past to the future.
Mhm,
It connects the old people with the young.
mhm.
And in parties and celebrations, it's the thing that's very common for joyous occasions or even sad occasions.
Mhm.
So songs and the meaning it gives to people is actually very powerful.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be showcased in this issue because, just like I said, Ren is a singer.
Mhm,
Filipinos love singing,
mhm,
and I think it made sense in a way for this ancient song to be a sort of connection
mhm.
for the light and the dark.
Yeah.
Somewhat, as you were saying earlier, the balance.
Mhm.
Actually, I'd like to think it more of as an equilibrium.
Okay.
That
Mhm,
sometime in the past there was this equilibrium that existed
mhm.
not only in the Philippines, but throughout the world,
Yeah.
in which the darkness and the light existed
Mhm,
in equilibrium, so they can both exist.
mhm.
So the aswangs and the other creatures can do what they want,
Right.
and then the Diwatas were there to keep it. It's not that they were the protectors, but they can also do the things that they wanted,
Mhm.
and then there were probably laws that existed between them that kept
Yep.
the peace. So
Right.
of course there would be wars here, wars there, battles here, conflicts,
Right.
but the equilibrium would always exist. And
Mhm.
something happened in the past that broke this equilibrium.
Right.
And this ancient song is the thing that reminds these ancient creatures about that equilibrium.
Right.
And that's why it carries such great power.
Right.
And I think that it justifies the ending
Mhm. I
if you
think so
think
too.
about it in that way.
I do too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let me add a couple of things because we had talked again early on, way back in issue 3 or even before that, about when we were making Ren a singer, that the way that she would connect with her mother, because they were at odds with each other from the beginning, that the way that they connected with each other was through singing, that was the thing that they had in common, that they could do together. And I liked when we started connecting that to the idea of the bloodline and the Diwata and all of that. But also we um One of the things that I'd come across when I was doing my reading was the story of the Bakunawa. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Bakunawa.
Yeah,
Bakunawa.
yeah. The
Actually, the first time I heard of it from you,
Yeah,
you mentioned it in the script.
yeah, was in the script. That's right. So the story is a dragon came and swallowed the moon, and the way that the village got the dragon to go away is they all came out and they all screamed at the top of their lungs until the noise drove it crazy and it made it go away.
Yeah.
I love the story, but I had no idea how it was going to work in this. And so I sort of set it aside while I was going through the rest of the stuff. And when you suggest the idea that they would be singing, it sort of, to me, it brought me back there and it said, oh, okay, the idea of joining voices together to do these things, that there's power in multiple people coming together, whether they sing, whether they yell, whatever it is that they do, it's that the people are coming together. Yeah, exactly. But it's the power is not necessarily the chant or necessarily the song or the word or the story or any of these things, that the power is that all these people are coming together to do it. For me, anyway. So when you suggested that, I was like, yes, I like that idea because it follows that idea. And one of the things that I like as working on this is where you can put these points of connection together. So, I like this idea and you like the singing idea and the idea of equilibrium, and, it's in the bloodline, and it's all these ideas come together and they all fit together so well and they connect up. That's the part that I love, and putting it all together and then seeing it and giving it to you to draw and again, make those connections. And so, yeah, so when you said it was like, I think you almost thought that you needed to convince me of the idea. And it's like, it's one of those things that when you said it, I was like, yes, I love that idea. So
yeah,
no.
yeah. When I was reading that, we usually make the teachers lounge.
Yep.
I mean, I know we converse a lot on email, and sometimes things gets lost. And then I got reminded of that conversation when I read through the draft of the latest teachers lounge, and when I read about that story about the what's it again, the Bakunawa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the people raising their voice. Yeah, I said, yeah, exactly that. I mean, it all fits together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Right, exactly. And I think that is how we approach storytelling, or that you and I, certainly it feels like when we are talking about it, is that we approach a story almost like a puzzle, where we're putting the different pieces together. And, some people are more than happy to just tell a straightforward story, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's how they do it. For us, it feels like we're interested in telling, in presenting puzzles and wanting people to put them together, and also us being able to put them together, and that's something that we enjoy in the creative process. And this is the puzzle that we put together to get us to here. And I hope it works, because I love it. I showed it to a couple of people and had them read it, and they were so overjoyed when they got to this point, and that they solved this through singing. It's just like it's a wonderful human story that most other storytellers wouldn't go there. They wouldn't trust their audience that it's okay to have singing be the way they solve it.
Singing is very integral to many cultures around the world. I mean, the one Irish guy who lives here in the Philippines says that the Irish are the Filipinos of Europe, because they love to drink, they love to sing, they love to dance, they love to have family gatherings with big families.
Right.
So yeah, I think that it kind of resonates with very diverse cultures around the world. I
do
mean,
too.
even in Africa, singing is a very big part of their culture.
Right. I think what it is that in America, we don't tend to talk about it. It's one of those weird things because I mean we have like American Idol and we have pop
Mm-hmm.
music and we have all this, but we don't talk about as a culture that singing is important to us. But it is to so many of us. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there's
Maybe
people who
because of the pop aspect of it.
yeah, I
But
think
it's
that
kind
could
of
be.
weird because in Japan, it can't get more pop than Japanese pop singers. But in Japan, the idols there are treated as if they're like maidens.
Mm-hmm.
They can't even have boyfriends or get married to a
Right.
certain point
Mm-hmm.
because people see them as this that they're not goddesses but more like maidens
Yeah,
who
chaste.
entertain the
Mm-hmm.
people, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like a very cultural
Mm-hmm.
duty for them,
Right.
and they're proud of it.
Right. Right, but it's also weird because in America there is a lot of singing. If you go to church, there's always singing. If it's common to be singing songs when you're a kid. If you watch TV, you hear songs all the time. I don't know. It's something
it's
about
it's
it.
the it's the first thing that children learn
Hmm.
is singing.
Right. And that's how we learn our ABCs by singing the ABC song. You know,
Yeah,
it's
correct.
there's it's so much of it, but it's weird that as a culture and especially as comics you very rarely have people sing. You
Yeah,
very rarely see it.
so that's why it's so nice to see that the from the very beginning of this story,
Hmm.
the song was already mentioned, and that from the when Mina was young,
Yep.
it's the first thing that she heard.
Right. It's the
So that
thing.
was
Hmm.
it's very important.
Right.
And then to see that Ren is still this person who loves singing,
Right.
all connects.
It all connects. That's it. So not only does the singing sort of push the aswang back, that sort of give them space, but it also gives the Diwata the power, the awareness that she can take the knife out, she can stop the volcano, and she sort of turns the light back on. That this ash cloud has been above them all this time, but now she's sort of parting it and letting the light back in. And as you said, she doesn't kill the Aswang, she doesn't destroy them, she tells them to go away and to maintain the balance, to maintain the equilibrium, that
Mm-hmm.
that these things can coexist. And that's sort of where we go to in this, is that it's very rare that the monster gets killed. It's more often that it goes away because these things exist. It's like nature.
Mm-hmm.
These things exist in an equilibrium, and that you can't have one without the other, that they all need to
Correct.
be able to coexist. And so you know one of the things that I was trying to do with that fourth panel where she's pointing at the aswang, and i I forget the name for the baby thing.
The
um
channel.
yeah, that there, it's the equilibrium, it's the balance, that you have the Diwata and Mina, who is her baby, and you have the
Mm-hmm.
Aswang and you have the baby creature, that those things coexist, that they're all part of the same reflections of one another. um
Say it's like an ecology,
mhm.
an ecosystem. They
Yeah,
need each other to exist.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, I think we're in the same place on that.
And
um
also in the Bakunawa, the sun and the moon cannot exist without the other.
mhm. Exactly. Yeah. uh, yeah, anyway, for people still listening, we are very much on the same page here. So okay, so the Aswang leave, and now we're left with Mina, who's feeling guilty, and her mother, the Dewata, coming over and pointing out, which is something that I think is important to the story, but also to sort of the bigger story, which is it doesn't matter what you did, it matters what you do now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you can't change the past, you can only change moving forward. And that you, like Dom, you have to embrace your duty and what you're supposed to do. That's the whole point of this story is Mina is embracing her duty, Ren is embracing her duty, Dom is embracing his duty. That these, by embracing their duty, this is what solves the situation here.
Yeah.
So ultimately, though, Mina decides that she has to stay. You know, Ario is gone, Dom is dead. Somebody needs to be the protector of the village. And it was supposed to be her. And now she needs to do her duty and she needs to stay. But what about Ren? You know, what is Ren going to do? And Ren, you know, the Diwata tells her there's still more for you to do. Speaking of the Diwata, how did you design this character? I'm kind of curious about that one.
Yeah. Well, she's supposed to be a nature spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted her to have earth colors.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, since I was in this the Japanese anime
Mm-hmm.
kind of mentality with the songs and the
Uh-huh.
themes, so I had a very big Japanese influence with this
Mm-hmm.
character.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some of the anime fans, weebs out there might recognize a bit of her design
Mm-hmm.
inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I also wanted to implement some flowers on her, like
Mm-hmm.
the on her head and on
Yeah.
her arms. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to look airy, like
Yeah.
she's she's wearing silk or something that's
Mm-hmm.
very flowing
Mm-hmm.
and very light.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the times these goddesses often walk the earth naked anyway. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they're supposed to be wind walking through grass. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's what the ancient people used to think when thinking about creatures like this. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when they feel a breeze, they feel the goddess pass by us or
Mm-hmm.
something. So I wanted her to have this ethereal feeling,
Yeah.
like she's. You often describe Ren like she's dancing
Mm-hmm.
through life,
Yep.
and I wanted her ancestor to be the same way,
Mm-hmm.
like she's flowing,
Mm-hmm.
like she's wind going through, through life.
Right. And you can see sort of the visual connections, you know, like the hair and some of the other things. You know, she really does feel like she's connected to Ren. You can sort of see, you know, the connection between the two characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I wanted to have that analog between them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the similarity with the hair
Mm-hmm.
and even the face. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to be very similar to Ren. It's
Yep.
like they say that every generation it jumps. So your
Yeah.
grandma may look like your daughter, and
Mm-hmm.
then so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
There are even pictures wherein you look exactly like one of your ancestors from
Mm-hmm.
before, and it's
Right.
very creepy.
Hmm. Um, right. So, okay. So the Diwata tells Ren that there's still more for her to do, and sends her, you know, back into her body. Finally, Ren can stop being her spirit form and get back into her body. Um, and she wakes up, and Natalia finds her, and Natalia wants to know about Dom. And Ren tells her a version of the truth about Dom, you know, which is that he saved the village, that he protected the village, and he died doing it, which is mostly true.
Mhm.
Um, and then Simon finds them, and is talking to Ren and getting ready to leave the village. And I love this last image of them sort of walking through the village. The only time we've seen the village is in darkness, and it's been a scary place, and it's been, a place that you didn't want to go outside. And now it's in the light, and you can see the mountain in the background, and that Mina and the Diwata are up there, and they're looking out over to protect the village. And it's such a different place, but it's such a beautiful image to weave this story on, that it's the reflection of what it was. It was dark, now it's light. It really it ends it on the perfect place for me. So I've told you many times I like that image, and I like it a lot. And then we have our last page. So the idea was always that Simon had caught the plane and was just on a layover, that he was supposed to already be in India at this point visiting his grandfather, and the whole the volcano and the ash cloud and everything kept him from being able to go. And so now that's all taken care of, he can move on and finish his journey. Ren sees him to the airport, and Simon thinks he's going by himself, onto India, and Ren just invites herself along, as Ren is wont to do. And again, talking about how characters develop, what we wanted to do here was to put Simon and Ren together and see how they developed, from this point of her not trusting him and hating him to this point now where she's volunteering to continue on his journey with him. And I like that this is where we're getting to with them, and that their journey is going someplace interesting. And the idea for me has always been, a lot of times when you hate someone, or you don't like someone, or you're scared of someone, it's usually that old Lovecraftian thing about the fear of the unknown. She didn't like Simon, but she didn't really know Simon, and that this journey together has given her a chance to actually find out who he is, and he's gotten to know her a little better, and they both sort of been changing and discovering each other as they go.
Yeah. I think it's the same with the other characters, which we'll find out later, that what the characters thought they knew about this character is entirely different. And that's what I like about stories, is that character progression, that nobody stays the same the whole way through.
Right.
That it's not that their attitudes are changing, it's that we discover more about them as we join them in their adventures. And that's really what makes a good story. It's first and foremost the characters for me.
But it's also the gift that we get because we're doing an ongoing comic, as opposed to, like you said, a mini series.
But that's the thing. That's why I wanted to go in this direction of being a continuous comic series, is that if we just do a miniseries, it kind of limits the progression of the characters, like I said before. And with knowing that this could, I don't know, it could end in 30 issues, it could end in 10 issues, who knows?
Right.
But not limiting yourself with the idea of you have to finish this in 5 issues kind of allows you a little more leeway into the way you create stories and help mold the characters to the way you want them to go through.
Right. Yeah, I mean, think about if we had ended the series on issue 6, and that had been where we left it. There's so much that we wouldn't have seen. There's so much to where the characters have gone and are going. It's a gift for me. I know comic writers who like to do miniseries and then another miniseries about something completely different, and that's the way that they like to write. But you know,
And that's fine
yeah,
as long as the characters continue growing
yeah,
and the stories also continue
yeah,
progressing to something more and more interesting as time goes on.
yeah.
And even in this in this last page, you still get hints of the future
Hmm.
in more ways than one.
Right. Which is a good place to leave this issue. That it's I hope that readers enjoy these two issues. I like when we do these two issue stories that we get to tell big stories and we don't have to rush them, and I think they work out really well. I really like the way this one turned out.
Mhm.
Um so but yeah, pointing to more stories to come.
Yeah, more stories to come.
More stories to come. Yeah. All right. Well, that is this. People listening to this, as you probably know, we are moving. We have issue 16 ready, but before we do that, we're going to do the Miskatonic High yearbook, which is our annual. We have a humongous story that Ryan and I did together, which we'll set aside about 17 hours for our commentary. Um,
Cool, man. Yeah.
maybe
How
we'll
many
cut
pages? 56 pages?
56 pages. Yeah, maybe we'll cut that one into smaller bites and do smaller commentaries for it. Um, and then we also have a number of backup stories in it. The Inside the Groundkeeper's Keep, which is the one that Nick O'Gorman and I did together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Venian is doing some spot illustrations for an H.P. Lovecraft story, which is looking awesome so far. Geist did some old-fashioned comic book advertisements like sea monkeys, but with a Lovecraftian bent. And then we have a tech story about early period of Miskatonic High and a substitute teacher who's coming to teach witchcraft, and things aren't quite don't go so well for her. They're not sure whether she's going to stay as a teacher or whether something is trying to drive her away. Which was a really good story written by my friend Koom. So yeah, so that is going to be the next one, and of course, we're going to have the yearbook section where backers can put their pictures or whatever image they want and write a quote. So I know that people are really looking forward to that. And
Sounds cool.
yeah, I think it's going to be excited. So many people that I've talked to, when I said, "Oh yeah, we're doing a yearbook," they're like, "Yearbook." They're very excited. So I think that's going to be a fun one.
Finally going to get one.
Finally, my yearbook. Yep, yep. So anyway, that is it for me. Is there anything else you want to add in before we go?
Yeah. Very excited for that annual.
Yeah.
Watch out for it.
Yep. Should be coming in August on Kickstarter. So um, if you can follow us along on Kickstarter, and you'll see us the moment that we launch.
All right.
All right. All right. Thanks, Ryan. I will talk to you soon.
Sure. See ya.
All right. All right. Bye, guys.